When you hear the word default in Valorant, a lot of times what comes to mind is teammates spreading out across the map, trying to get picks, trying to get info. But then what ends up happening is either someone on your team actually gets picked and then the default falls apart, or you guys are dilly-dallying around hoping something happens, someone makes a call, and then in the last 30-20 seconds, you guys are scrambling to hit a site and the round also falls apart. But what if I told you defaults are actually possible in ranked? You don't need a duo, you don't need a 5-stack team to really pull this coordinated thing off. It is possible. And so in this video, I'm going to show you how you can exactly do that. And I'm also going to show you that there are actually different types of default setups that are used for different purposes. And I'm going to show you how to actually execute those different types of defaults. And if you don't know who I am, I'm Konpeki. I'm a Radiant coach since episode 1, and I've coached thousands of students at this point, rank up to Immortal, Radiant. And this lesson is taken directly from a lesson that I taught inside of my 8-week coaching program. And so if you guys are interested in ranking up 500 RR in 8 weeks, guaranteed, or your money back, then use the link down below to book a free call with either myself or one of my coaches to see if you would be a good fit. Now, let's dive in. Your primary goal on a default, especially for attackers, is to gain info on where defenders are playing on each side, baiting utility, and then getting picks. Defaults are great for countering these 3 scenarios. Aggressive defender plays, so 3 people are pushing out on, let's say, like Lotus. It's good for countering that. Stack sites on eco. You don't want to run into 5 people with shotguns on a site with all your rifles. And also failed 5-man pushes, because again, like if you fail 5-man pushes, a lot of times you get trapped, you get pinched, you get flanked. So to counter that, you want to spread out a little bit. So there are different types of default setups. A 104 setup is a precautionary setup with your sentinel on the opposite side of the map that your team will fast hit, so you know if the enemies are flanking. A 131 setup is great for split pushing towards any site because the 3 lets you branch off either towards A or B. And a 212 setup is the most common setup as well that will help you obtain the most amount of info in the safest way against aggressive plays, because you're paired up on the extremities of the site, so you're able to get trades on each other. And then a 104 setup, this is when 5-man versus failed. One lurker is going to kill that Reyna that's flanking, and then now your teammates can have the option to still hit the other site, because now that the Reyna dies, the defender's going to be, oh shoot, like B is open now, we have to send one person back. And so that's going to make it a little easier for the 4 people to hit the site, or your team can regroup and hit the other side of the map. Common mistakes on defaults: prioritizing picks and dying alone. I mentioned this before. And if this happens a lot, if you're going for picks, have one person with you. Do a 2-1-2 setup. Stage 0 and 1 are fine. So the pre-round and the opening rounds, opening zones that are being contested for are fine. But there's a lack of initiative during stage 2, because I've seen this where you guys are able to safely get info and you guys have a decent setup, but then after you get the info, I've noticed in ranked games too, people are okay, like now we know where people are, but what do we do? Which side do we actually hit? This is when you really need to identify, okay, like where's weak side, strong side, and call your teammate to rotate, group up, and then hit the weak side. All right. And this is an example of an attacker default. Fnatic won both rounds. Looks like this is their bonus because they have their bulldog. Some of them actually bought. Look at Durka. He spent 4,000, but still has 1650. So he can still buy again the next round. This is what happens if you properly win the second round.
Nobody around him. Well, he's done well to get the first. Aftershocks can clear him out. He's some.
Fnatic actually manages to lose this round, but what's great is this is their bonus. They kill at least 2 people. I think they kill a little more after this, and they got the bomb down. So they got even more money. How did they manage to do it? You got to understand macro. Notice how at the start, you use 1 flash, a dart, and the enemy KJ actually was ready for this B hit anyways because it's a bonus. But notice how because Durka was able to get up here, it doesn't get hit at all, waste all their utility. Drones to also get garage control. And so now at this point, they think it's a B because they tapped the bomb. So now all the defenders' attention's on B. They need to use their dog. They have no info on B. And so this forces them to waste their utility to re-clear all of B. And because they lost garage control as well, notice how Astra has to play all the way back in CT. And so this guy's completely isolated. And so what they've accomplished is they made C side into weak side. And once they've identified it, they shifted over towards garage. They should have just waited for the Astra to lurk up behind. The Chronicle gave him another kill, but boom. They get the site that way. Okay, so this is An attacker default. Now let's get into defender default setup. On the defense side, you have 3 different options for playing around the zones. You can push the zone, you can hold the zone, and you can yield it or give it up. Pushing the zone is great for countering stacked executes. So that's like attackers doing 4 or 5 man pushes. So a 1-1-3, 1-3-1, 3-1-1 stack towards one opening zone where the attackers are most likely go to is great because it can throw people off guard. And a play like this might be Omen blinding a main, Jet dashing, and then getting like a Silva dart on top of that to really secure some kills. Oh, so the weak side, the 1-1 side plays retake and they give up the zone in case attackers don't push the stack site. That's how you want to play this scenario. If enemies are not there, you want to flank as 2 people and leave the 3rd person on site to watch a mid push or lurk, holding the zones. This is the most common setup, 2-1-2, and this is to cover all chunks of the map that enemies can enter through, and you get the most amount of information, and it's the safest against aggressive plays. A 3-0-2 setup or 2-0-3 setup is also possible if you have Sentinel utility holding mid, and you get to at least have 1 extra player on each side of the map. And you can also post up with an op on a deep angle for holding a zone, and this gives you a lot of map control. So this is priority for defenders. Remember, I said a 1-for-1 trade is terrible for defenders. So either you kill 2 at least and die and get traded, you kill 1 and then play retake with your team, or if you cannot manage to kill anyone and you're stuck on site, then stay alive as long as possible back site or on site with whatever you have and just be a cockroach. And this allows you to buy a lot of time for your teammates to come and help you and crunch the enemies once they're on site. And while they're trying to find where you are, while they're trying to kill you back site, your teammates can come in and shoot them from the back. Generally want to contest the opening zones to condition attackers into committing utility. This is key. And I think this is what a lot of even Ascendant Immortal players don't do. So if you are contesting opening zones, you don't always have to push out. You don't always have to hold it. You can give it up. But at least if you make a presence there and manage to make plays around the opening zones too, by pushing it or using your own utility, attackers will have to respect that. They'll be conditioned to know you're a possible threat for those opening zones. And so if they can commit utility, you have less util to deal with on site. But yeah, you do need to know when to play safe and give up some map control. So that's yielding the zone. So an example would be like an Omen blind into a Jet, into a Silva dart. And you guys can crunch this area. Maybe Silva starts here or here. And then maybe you have like a Cypher here. Just have another duelist, like a random duelist, like playing mid. So if your teammates are playing aggressive towards one side of the map, you guys need to be aware that you guys are playing weak side. So it is silly of you to just try to make a play on your own, die, and then now this guy is like, you can't do anything. So you guys have to play really passively. And once Jet takes this area, you guys can double up together, push out, while this guy now goes back mid to cover all of this, to cover all of this, and you guys can fast flank. And so now you've officially contained all the enemies on B if they don't come A. The Cypher should be aware that it's going to take a long time for these A players to get to him, so he'll probably have to play off site. And this guy has to play, he has to wait too for their team to come in, and then you guys can crunch them. That's the strat. Holding the zones, if you have a Cypher trip, let's say holding mid like this, that means you can have 2 people on site, and then you can have 3 players towards A. This is a 2-0-3 setup. And then an example of like just trying to stay alive, if you get Omen blinded, this is the start, Reyna can fall back site, and as enemies are coming in to get her, and while they're in this area, her teammates can come out and pinch them from the back. Yeah, like we're gonna get into all the rules really specifically, but like an easy way to, let's say, contest for an opening zone is like a one-way smoke on either of these choke points. And that's gonna help you guys, again, like force enemies to use their utility really early on if they do want this neutral space. If not, they'll have to slow down and wait out your smoke. And by that point, you guys can be getting into wine, you guys, you know, get into a lot of these off angles that enemies will have to re-clear. Or if, let's say, like you're playing on A, and you hear that a lot of them are going B, throw a smoke choke point. And then again, like if your teammate is forced to go back site and he's trying to stay alive as long as possible, throw them a side smoke like this. So that way this guy can play around the smoke, either inside the smoke, outside the smoke. Okay. And it helps your guys stay alive longer, and the attackers have to guess, oh shoot, like what's this random smoke? I gotta worry about it. Same thing on A. Like you can smoke this off first, but if you want to actually hold it instead of yielding it, because a lot of times, like if I'm playing Jet, I have no stall ability. I'm not going to play on site. If they're coming A, I'm just running here and just playing retake with my team. I try to get maybe 1, but if I want to play on site as Omen, because I can also do this blind, then I'm gonna throw a second side smoke right here. And again, like play around it. So it's all situational, but this is again, just an introduction to how map control works. So this is an example of pushing the zone. BLG. BLG pushing out. They're on their save because they lost piss around. It doesn't go the way they plan to, but this is just an idea.
Aspect and really cause some damage, cause some problems for NRG. Some will be tested here, but
Oh my.
Pretty crazy, right? So this is an example where it didn't go so well, but the whole pushing the zone on defense strat, I said, is a high risk, high reward. So they took a big risk, didn't play out so well for them. But if they got the kill on Omen, it might have been really good. So it's all situational. Okay, micro positioning, and we're out of here. So I talked about how macro is overview. Let's read where all 10 players on the map are. Micro is relative to where you're playing, okay? So spacing, this is where you're standing around teammates. If you're too close, you get collided. If you're too far from your teammates, you can't trade or pinch enemies. Angle isolation is a topic that I touched upon during the mechanics class, how we're able to isolate angles using cover and slicing the pie. And if we can also utilize angle advantages and cover around the map and crossfires, first and second contact. Let's actually expand on this in Valorant. So now you have this scenario where Reyna's playing in this cubby, just playing in this cubby on lamp. Like an enemy is trying to come in from backside like this. So who should have first contact? If we come out with this white line, if you see a guy lamps first, you'll try to shoot him. And while you're turned around, the Reyna can easily swing out and kill this guy in the back, okay? But what happens if the Reyna here decides to peek first and take first contact like this? You see how it gets broken?
Yeah.
This crossfire? Because now if Reyna peeks first and even tries to bait out shots like someone mentioned, what if this all goes bad? Because now if Reyna has a deeper line of sight into this cubby by hut, and Jet has to swing all the way out left to be able to see this angle. And so if this guy's fast, you know, he might kill Reyna first and then turn around and kill this Jet that's trying to swing it. But if Reyna tucks in and holds this line, as soon as he crosses this line, sees Jet, this guy swings out, checkmate. Once we understand first and second contact, let's talk about how micro positioning can be further elaborated upon for side control. So having good relative positioning allows your team to establish more side control, okay? And the more side control you guys have, the easier trades you're gonna have for your team. You're gonna create more angles for the enemy team to clear before they get onto the site and get to the spike. It's gonna also put more pressure on the clock because they have more space to clear, more angles to clear. How to control these sites, very similar concepts between holding positions. So when you're playing defense, you're holding a choke point, right? But also, once you plant the bomb, the roles have reversed, or the defenders are coming back onto the site to try to defuse a spike. So again, you're holding that choke point as an attacker. Pushing position. So when you're attacking the site, you're going through a choke point, and when you're retaking the site, you're also going through a choke point to get onto the site. The main theme is to cover each other's backs while exposing yourself to the least amount of angles as possible. So always communicate what angles people are holding, what you're holding, so you guys have everything covered. So let's elaborate more on these holding and pushing scenarios. When you're defending, you should always have a teammate who can rotate quickly to help you hold the same choke, or a plan to fall back if there isn't. So if you're alone. If you're defending the spike, you want to spread out throughout the site, hold every choke possible, be ready to trade your teammates instantly. Also use your utility, whatever you have. You don't always have to use utility on the spike. Like if you have KJ mollies, you don't always have to molly the bomb. You can molly the choke points to delay the push from happening. For pushing scenarios, when you're attacking, spread out throughout the site evenly in pairs. This is important too, to cover as many angles and trade each other out. If you go too fast, so I'm calling out Jets, Raze mains, Neon mains, Yoru mains who like to TP backside alone. If you go too fast, your teammates can't trade you out. So again, this is spacing. During retakes, try to come in from as many choke points or sides as possible to clear as much space. That allows you to clear as much space in the most time efficient manner. And it also applies a lot of pressure because one person can only hold one angle. Key takeaways: pay very close attention to how far away you are from your teammate and whether you're close enough to peek with your teammates to get the trade. Communication is really important to set up good positioning, and util will make it a lot easier to isolate angles, just like how I mentioned with the molly example. So this is the last slide for tonight. When you are trying to work on your positioning, whether you're VOD reviewing yourself, whether you're getting coached, whether you're just playing by yourself, ask yourself these questions if you want to improve on your positioning. Revision or info control. Was I in a spot where I'm able to gather information safely and still get out if I need to? Was it worth it for me to push up to gain information versus using my utility? Because sometimes I get greedy and want to save my util so that I can use it later in the round, but that might cost me my life. Okay, how much map control did my team have during that round, and what could I have done differently to establish more control safely? Okay, so if you felt like we had no map control that one round, okay, it's because you think back, oh, we didn't have mid control, or no one was watching mid. Who can peek mid safest? Okay, if we have a Jet and she has an op, okay, let's just have her peek tiles, or let's have her peek top mid and deal with mid. And now we have mid control. We can worry less and we can focus on one other choke point. I'll just give an example. Remember how with Haven, I said A main is the most important part of the map because it eliminates these two lanes. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if we get control over A main, this essentially becomes only one lane, okay? Whether you watch it from long or whether you watch it from short, it becomes one lane. With Ascent, okay? Again, like recognize these patterns. It's all about pattern recognition. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 lanes because it's only a 2-site map. So if we get mid control, we're able to cover both of these lanes. And that means as a mid player, if we have a 2-1-2 setup and as one player with a single operator holding down mid, we don't have to worry about mid or tiles. We don't have to worry about cat and a lurk through mid. That means both defenders on each site only have to worry about A main or B main. Makes our life way easier, right? And guess what? If they're not coming mid, we get a fast rotate. So now we have 3 players holding down this tiny choke. And that's how you want to think about map control and ask yourself these questions when you're trying to play back around in your head that you lost. Okay, which part of the map do we not have control over? And how can we rearrange our setup so that we're able to maximize the amount of map control we get with our utility? Bomb site control. Did my team cover all parts of the site smoothly together as we were entering the site? So that's like thinking about spacing too. Too fast, too slow. Did we cover the most amount of angles that we can as we were defending, retaking, attacking, holding a site based on our position? Because sometimes we can't have 2 people both looking at door and then an enemy peeking heaven on a site. Were we setting up good crossfire positions when holding a choke position? And for relative positioning, was I in a good position to trade out my teammate? Was I first or second contact? Was I too far away or too close to my teammate? Like if it got collided? What angles are my teammates not exposed to? Did I overextend myself where my teammates couldn't help me? This is like just pushing out by yourself. Sometimes you can do this. It's a high risk, high reward play where you can actually catch people off guard if you think you have a timing by pushing out. But if that doesn't happen, then you screwed your teammate over. Should I have known that the enemy could have been coming from that direction? As in, should I have been aware that no one was watching a part of the map because they rotated off? Or were there holes in the map because someone rotated off and they didn't comment? If that's the case, then someone should be commenting that, right? Then you can ask them to comment next time, but don't get upset at them, even if you want to.